Welcome everyone, and really thank you for joining us today to come to your Census Artists, a conversation about art, disability, advocacy, and participating in the 2020 census. This event is part of a series of civic action inspired by the show The Good American, featuring American-themed artwork by over 20 artists from Creativity Explored. My name is Cléa Massiani. I am the curator and exhibition coordinator at Creativity Explored. Currently, I am wearing a black turtleneck. I have long hair, and I have a necklace around my neck. So I'm also the curator of the show The Good American. So Creativity Explored, for those of you who don't know, is an art center that provides a supportive studio environment for artists with developmental disabilities, along with a gallery space where we exhibit the work. We are located in the Mission District in San Francisco. So today we are joined by our wonderful panelists. I'm going to start introducing everybody. So we have Art+Action founder and artistic director of social impact, Kisch, and executive producer, project director, Brittany Ficken. So Art+Action is San Francisco's first coalition of civic participation across art, creative, community, business, technology, philanthropy, and government sectors. We also have artist and collaborator Ana Teresa Fernández. Her works explore the politics of intersectionality through time-based action and social gesture, translating in general into painting, installations, and video. We also are joined today by the Executive Director of San Francisco's Office of Civic Engagement and Immigration Affairs, Adrienne. So OCIA is a policy, compliance, and direct service agency that also funds grants for an innovative program ranging from citizenship and immigration assistance to community safety, Dream SF Fellows, language access, and of course, the 2020 Census outreach and education. And finally, our last panelist is Director of the San Francisco Mayor's Office on Disability, Nicole. So in her role, she works to oversee the ADA compliance and ensure physical, electronic, and programmatic accessibility of all city and county funded program and services. So currently, Nicole's primary mission involves being responsive to community needs related to COVID response and recovery. So first of all, thank you all so much for coming. Really appreciate your presence and your input on this really important time. So before we start, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about the show, The Good American. So The Good American is really a humorous show full of allegories and symbols of American cultural maker and trademarks. And most importantly, it is a platform and a safe space for artists to express themselves, because artists are political as well, and it's a really important part of our organization. But The Good American is also an ideal. It encourages mutual understanding, addressing larger issues such as immigration, voting rights, and we're hoping for it to, be a tight platform for the community to come together. I am myself a legal immigrant here, not being able to vote, but being able to take the census. And so those issues are extremely important to me personally as well. So today we're talking census, art, and disability. And I'm going to turn into you guys, Amy and Brittany, for the first part of our conversation. And let me share my screen. All right. Can everybody see it? Yeah. Excellent. Good American. I'll leave it to you, Amy and Brittany.
Sorry, I'm back. I'm unmuted now. Thanks, Cléa, and everybody who's here today. I'm Amy Kisch, a tan woman with brown hair and a fluorescent yellow shirt that says "Somos Visibles," or "We Are Not Invisible." I'm founder of the Art+Action Coalition, who launched the Come to Your Census campaign.
I'm Brittany Ficken. I am a fair-skinned woman with brown hair, blue eyes, and I am Art+Action's executive producer and project director.
We were engaged by Adrienne from San Francisco's Office of Civic Engagement and Immigrant Affairs, who recognized the power of art to move people to action. Our challenge was how to use art to humanize a vital but bureaucratic process. In response, we created a campaign that mirrors the ethos of the census itself, built on a foundation of equity, parity, democracy, and agency. Next slide.
So to authentically have impact across all the communities that we wanted to reach, particularly the hard to count, it was vital that the campaign reflect the community's voices and languages, not just our own. So Art+Action built a coalition across art, creative, community, business, tech, activists, and government sectors. Next slide. And we invited curators and artists who had ties to the communities most undercounted in the census to be a part. It was essential to us that each was compensated equally, whether they be world-renowned artists or community or youth artists. If you go to our site, www.cometoyourcensus.us, you can see all the incredible 50+ artists involved in the campaign. Next slide. So from the very beginning of our work, we were extremely proud to have Creativity Explored as one of our most active coalition partners. CE artist Antonio Benjamin and Andrew Lee's artwork is featured prominently in the public media campaign, both in the Bay Area and nationwide. And in addition to those two artists, several additional Creativity Explored artists had work featured in the exhibition Come to Your Census, Who Counts in America, which Art+Action curated with the Art+Action Curatorial Coalition and Yerba Buena Center for the Arts. Once COVID hit, the exhibition went online. In conjunction with the Good American, Art+Action is thrilled to gift the CE community a bunch of Come to Your Census tote bags and t-shirts from our coalition partner Levi's, and local artist Leah Nichols' How to 2020 Census postcards to inspire everyone to complete their census. Creativity Explored is also continuing to be a part of the census call to action by dedicating their mission storefront to Art+Action's latest The Census Equals Money and Power initiative, which will feature artwork by Stephanie Sujuko and Brian Singer. And then lastly, it's been so incredible that Ana Teresa Fernández, who has been one of Art+Action's most active artist collaborators, introduced us to her poster project Somos, which she will tell you more about shortly. Next slide.
The Come to Your Census campaign was designed to be accessible and adaptable to reach the general public and the hard to count. Next slide. First, our biggest initiative is our outdoor media campaign, designed to educate through a big, bold, street-level advertising presence. We meet people where they live and work via billboards, newsstands, transit shelters, public walls, and on digital billboards and Ubers and Lyfts. And you can see Andrew Lee and Antonio Benjamin's work in this. Next slide. Our calls to action, Come to Your Census San Francisco, families, voters, students, Mission Bayview, are also communicated in the 4 official languages of San Francisco: Chinese, Spanish, English, and Tagalog. Next slide. Second, we established a place, both physical and digital, where people can learn, be inspired, act, and add their voice. Next slide. As we mentioned, we planned an interactive exhibition at YBCA, which featured a variety of Creativity Explored artists, which is now online, and offer a multilingual toolkit filled with artist assets. Next slide. The third part of our campaign, next slide, is our public programming, designed to cultivate curiosity and autonomy for people to make their own decision as to whether to take the census. Next slide. In-person activations like mobile silkscreen workshops, youth-led art making, and murals have now moved to digital storytelling hours, interactive line cutting, and community forums. Next slide. One of our projects, Arlene Correa Valencia and Ana Teresa Fernandez's Hoodie for Census, Somos Visibles, We Are Not Invisible, attracted a Levi's sponsorship and takes a political stance on visibility through the use of high-vis, ready-to-wear safety gear present through many labor industries and as it relates to the invisibility of the undocumented in the US. Next slide. In the context of the 2020 census, Somos Visibles engages undocumented and marginalized communities in dialogue about their fears of being counted, seen, and having their voices heard to receive their fair share of resources. Next slide. Somos Visibles has been so incredibly powerful that it now spans 2 billboards in the SF Bay area featuring one of its artists, Arlene Correa Valencia. Next slide. Finally, we have our Bring the Census to the People initiative. Next slide.
And during this final census push, we're distributing Come to Your Census assets through food and diaper distribution centers, at protest sites, through our artists and the city office partners. And our goal is to still reach as many people as we can. Next slide. We're committed to providing inspiration and information, collaborating with our artists to offer coloring pages, how-to 2020 census postcards, and the $20,000 census bill, among other assets. Next slide.
With less than 3 weeks until the newly shortened census deadline of September 30th, Art+Action is urging our coalition partners and everyone who can to take action in your neighborhoods to ensure that your community receives its fair share of federal funding and political representation for the next 10 years. You can download our Money and Power posters featuring artwork and put them up in your neighborhood grocery stores, bodegas, laundromats, coffee shops, liquor stores, on community and school bulletin boards, walls, storefront windows, boarded up or as is. We're even giving giveaways for people who send us proof of doing their census. Next slide. Our vision from the very start for Come to Your Census was to create something that anyone, anywhere could use. The campaign has been adopted by Taos, New Mexico and Philadelphia, and with the support of the Ford Foundation is now in Texas and Florida. We just unveiled 12 billboards in the 2 states featuring artwork by local artists who responded to our open call. Now we invite you to bring this to your communities. Here's how. Next slide.
1, you can download our ready-to-use files directly from our census toolkit on our website. Next slide. 2, you can customize the campaign for your own community. You're welcome to highlight the voices of the artists in your community in our format, or you can use the artwork that we provide. And you can order design files online by completing the Google form on our website or just by sending us an email. Next slide. 3, if you want to bring the incredible Hoodie for Census project to your own community, you can get Somos High-Vis gear from our coalition partners in Bisbee, Arizona, Print Stitch and Premier Alliances, Inc. These are 2 nonprofits that help improve the lives of people with disabilities. Next slide.
This is actually this next one, but please finish.
Lastly, if you haven't already, spend 10 minutes online or via phone and answer the 9-question census, and encourage your friends and family to do it too. Thank you.
Thanks. This is great. This is really giving us a whole idea of what you guys have been doing and how the work you've been doing is so amazing and so powerful because of the visual component and the art component that you're including in that. And we're so proud and so happy to be partnering up with you finally on this project. So actually this is a great segue for our next panelist, Ana Teresa Fernández, who also is working with CE, Creativity Explored, on multiple projects. So Ana, if you can tell us a little bit more about the Somos project and also your contribution to what you're working on with CE artists at the moment.
Hi, everyone. My name is Ana Teresa Fernandez. I am a tall Mexican woman. I'm sitting down so you can't see that, but I'm wearing a braid, dark hair, mid to dark skin. I'm wearing a bright orange shirt that says "We're Not Invisible" from our census projects with Art+Action and Arlene Correa Valencia. So when Amy first approached me, as well as Brittany, with Art+Action about creating this campaign to try and expand and articulate within the hidden branches of our communities the idea of really creating consciousness of how important it is to fill out the census. I myself had never filled out the census prior to this. I didn't realize how important it was. So for me, it was a huge learning curve. And as soon as I found out the poignancy of this, I realized that one of the biggest assets that we can contribute was both with language, of course, being bilingual, but not only that, also the fact that I had been working with Creativity Explored for the last year, doing a different project, and how we could help amplify that. And one of the first things that I realized was I had about 500 posters left over from a previous campaign. After 2011, after I Erased the Border, I was actually approached by a member from the Zapatista community down in Chiapas, in San Cristobal de las Casas. And he asked me if I could collaborate with them. And I was like, well, is there anything specific? I mean, I don't like to kamikaze into communities, but I actually like to think about it. So since 2011, we had been in conversation on and off about how to engage their community. And it wasn't until 2015 when he reached out again and he said, listen, I think something is stirring. And finally, in 2016, there's this individual called Maria de Jesus Patricio Martinez, shorter name for Marichui, which is the woman that you see on the left-hand side, who is a traditional healer and a human rights activist from the Nahua tribe in Mexico. A little bit of background: altering a strategy which has rejected the Mexican state and its electoral politics, the Zapatistas announced in December 2016 their plans to elect a female spokesperson to represent the indigenous community as presidential candidate. On May 28, 2017, Marichui was elected by the National Indigenous Congress as their spokesperson and representative for the presidency. Her campaign reflected both a displacement and adherence to postmodern Zapatista politics on the one hand, which they reject the state power as a political goal, and on the other, by endorsing Marichui, they joined an electoral competition of alternative state projects. So one of the things that was when I was approached by them, we began this conversation in how to amplify her attempt to run for candidacy within individuals here in the United States, because there's a mass population of Mexicans that live in the US. And not only that, but even within Mexico, I think that there's still a dividing, there's a separating space between people that think that they don't belong because they're not indigenous, or they don't understand. So thinking about ways in which we could bridge both individuals from Mexico to become aware of Marichui and who she is and what she was representing. And not only that, but as well as in the US, bringing awareness to institutions with a lot of individuals that are from Mexican-born families. So we work together with the Zapatistas and creating to help, because one of the things that as an artist, I realized, I was like, there is no one image that they're using for her campaign. There was like an amalgamation, and a lot of the stuff that the posters and visuals had a lot of information. So it was like, okay, let's make something really clear, really strong, and something that suggests that we stand with her, beside her, behind her, you know, all around, we're all united. And so the word somos, and little did I realize that Comandante Marcos had actually used this word quite a bit when he first helped form with the coalition with the Zapatistas in '92. And so it was kind of like the rebirth of the word somos, and then kind of like helping amplify her voice. So we took her image, took the design of the 62 Olympics, and which is actually Nahua, a design, Nahua design, so kind of like portraying her background as well, and putting her image in the middle. And not only that, when we distributed the poster, we also distributed a blank one, because one of the things that I realized is that oftentimes in these rallies, political rallies, or kind of like convergence and committee talks and whatnot, there's always a bunch of children that are like bored to tears on the floor, like, you know, looking at ants. And so it was like, bring these posters to these rallies, and not only can we have individuals, you know, create statements on the blank poster, but we can actually foment some curiosity from like all ages of individuals. And so what ended up happening, I got invited to different universities to come and speak about her and activate having students talk about their identity. And it became this really, I don't know if we have an image of that, Cléa, of the, not that one. Okay, well, it's okay. We can hold off on that one. And so beyond that, we ended up having all these, we can go back. So we ended up having all these extra posters so when the Amy's and Brittany asked me, I said, well, you know, for a previous campaign, I made these posters. We can probably readapt them to have people incite people to tell us who they are, because isn't the census all about visibility? And it can be a really playful, creative way that we can engage individuals, you know, in different communities. But then we ended up doing, you know, the Somos Visibles sweatshirts and hoodies, kind of like that. Kind of, we veered off a little bit into a different direction using the same word Somos. But then we finally came back to the poster and I said, well, specifically, let's use these with the Creativity Explored Artists, because, and not only that, but because of these posters are meant to be posted outside, let's really turn it into a public campaign in which we get the artists to do this workshop with us, to tell us who they are, what they want to say about themselves, whether it is like a direct portrait of themselves or something that they really like. If anything that I learned working with them, they're really obsessed with what they like. So it doesn't need much prompting, whether it's like yellow cake or watermelon in the summer, or, you know, hearts. And I think that their personality shines so clearly as they're creating, that I think that it was such an easy way to have them tell us something about themselves. So once we collect them, we're gonna actually I'm gonna go pasting them on Valencia Street in that public wall. So it creates a huge mural of the artists telling us who they are.
This is great. Thank you so much for really explaining and showing us the backstory of this project. So most that we will be hosting actually public workshop with you on September 26th, Saturday, September 26th at 1 p.m. We already, as the picture is showing us, hosted one with the artist, which was pretty fantastic and very well attended, actually. So we already have the material from the artist, but we want to have more, and of course having it being open to the public in the conversation of the show The Good American. So thank you, Ana, again for collaborating with us all the time. And so I'm actually going to jump into our last two panelists because I think we're all really excited also to hear from the mayor's office and from the city itself. So I'm going to start with you, actually, Adrienne. So tell us about updates and what you've been working on in the last couple months, I guess.
Okay, can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Okay, hi everyone. I am Adrienne Pan. I'm an Asian woman with dark clothing, hair, and eyes, and a big smile. I want to thank Cléa and Creativity Explored for including us in this conversation. Before I joined the city and county of San Francisco, I used to run a little arts and tech museum for kids called Zeum. It's now called the Children's Creativity Museum. As an inclusive place for kids and families of all abilities and learning styles, I learned a couple of lessons that still stick with me today. One, what sparks imagination and motivates creativity in young people? And two, even small children can advocate for themselves, negotiate terms, and make decisions. So in approaching the 2020 census, it was always about asking ourselves, how do we motivate residents to self-respond to the census? How do we get them to see this as an opportunity for civic engagement and meaningful participation? And our residents, in order to do that, our residents would, of course, need to see themselves and feel included in images and words that we use during the campaign. So if you go to the first slide, we started off the groundwork for the 2020 census last July with a lot of outreach and education. In January, Speaker Nancy Pelosi and Mayor Breed launched the official SF Counts campaign at City Hall, and we were all set to kick off a series of in-person events and assistance centers, and this would happen just before the U.S. Census Bureau dropped the online census questionnaire. And this, of course, was the first all-digital census in the history of this country. Next slide. But of course, just as we were launching these events, COVID-19 hit us hard, and we were left with a challenge since the middle of March of how to overcome a double pandemic of both COVID-19 and the virus of racism and inequality, and how to inspire hope and motivate our residents to participate in the census without all of the in-person aspects. Next slide. So here's where we stand today. San Francisco is a bit behind. We're at 65.1%, about where we are nationally, but below the rate for California. And at this time in 2010, we were at 68.5, and we finished at 72%, the highest in the state. So meanwhile, the Trump administration has continued to mess around with the census, you know, changing the rules, suppressing participation by immigrants and communities of color, shifting the end date. And the Census Bureau does accounting, but they're under-resourced, they're disorganized, and also they stopped their operations early. But we have a job to do in San Francisco. We're not going to give up. It's up to all of us to do the motivation to our residents and for them to do the census. Next slide. However, for some residents, it is not that easy to participate. They may face overwhelming digital, physical, or language barriers. They may ask, why bother when it's very clear that this administration really doesn't want to count everyone, that they don't matter to the administration. And it's not surprising that the hardest to count areas in the city, mostly in the southeast part of the city, Chinatown, Bayview, Mission, these are same areas hardest hit by COVID-19. We have a lot of SROs, people who are facing homelessness, poverty, many people who are food and housing vulnerable, and many people who have moved away because they lost their jobs and can't afford to live in the city. Next slide. But we do have a lot of at risk if we don't get all our residents included in the census count. Like $8 billion over the next 10 years for schools, hospitals, clinics, roads, basic needs programs, housing, technology, jobs, and more. And also, of course, our fair political representation, which we sorely need right now. Next slide. So the message that we're sending to all of our residents is it's not too late to participate. We're working together across city departments. I'm so happy that my colleague Nicole Bond is going to speak next. Our leaders, our community organizations, our wonderful partners at Art+Action, and all the wonderful artists that are involved in this process. We have got to get everybody to encourage the 150,000 households in the city that still haven't done the census to take the action now, because we're all depending on it. Our kids, our families, our first responders. Next slide. And this is the final slide. So using art as an inclusive vehicle to reflect all of our communities and all of our people is a main part of our campaign. People won't take the action unless they see themselves in the effort and feel like they're valued in the effort. So in this census, and especially at this time in history, every voice matters, and a lot of lives are depending on it. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Adrienne. I'm actually just going to turn it to Nicole, and we're going to hear from Disability Office in San Francisco.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me today. My name is Nicole Bond. I'm the director of the Mayor's Office on Disability. I am white. I wear glasses. I'm also a wheelchair user. I now have medium length brown hair. It used to be much shorter before COVID, but here we are. So what I wanted to do today is talk for a few minutes about, give you a flavor for when we talk about disability in San Francisco. What are we really talking about, and what has the impact of COVID been on folks with disabilities as far as it's come to the attention of the Mayor's Office on Disability, and how does that impact the census? So the first thing to know about disability in San Francisco is related to COVID in particular, and these themes I'm about to talk about are really not unique to San Francisco residents with disabilities across time, but they are specifically highlighted in COVID time, is that people with disabilities are feeling especially isolated and closed in and shut in and quarantined in many cases because of concerns around being at risk for contraction of COVID. And we also know that we have historically people with disabilities do not always have access to the kind of technology to be able to participate digitally. We know that we have issues with connectivity, and then just generally access to services have been a struggle that we're really working hard to address. So what this means is that since this was already the circumstance before COVID was among us, now the situation is even more highlighted, and I think it's impacted the way that we've been able to reach folks during our census campaign. So when we're talking about disability in San Francisco, first of all, people are sometimes surprised to know that we have over 94,000 folks who have reported some sort of disability in San Francisco, and almost half of these folks are under age 65. So it's not just seniors that we're talking about. We're talking about a pretty large percentage of our population. This data is based on our American Community Survey, so they have very specific categories by which they classify and count disability. But when we're thinking about disability, we're talking about folks with physical disabilities who have some sort of cognitive or intellectual disability, a sensory disability like having difficulty hearing or seeing. It's unclear how the American Community Survey addresses and accounts for psychiatric disability, but that and chronic health condition, but those are also overlaid in these numbers too. The other thing that we know is that when you look at the disability population as a whole, African American or Black individuals are twice as likely to self-report disability and experience disability as white people or other people of color. So that is just something to keep in mind. And it's linked also, if we could go to the next slide, to income, poverty, and employment. So 1 in 4 folks with disabilities experience poverty. Even adults with disabilities who are employed are more than twice as likely within their employment to still be in poverty. And really, the other piece I wanted to highlight on this screen is that folks with disabilities generally report feeling unsafe traveling alone or in their neighborhood more than the general population. So what does all this mean? It means that we know that we have specific neighborhoods that we've had a very difficult time reaching, and that we need to be in these final weeks really intentional as we're thinking about our images and our campaigns and the way that we're reaching folks, to really be also thinking about what would be considered maybe a hidden but very critical part of our population and neighborhoods, and that is folks with disabilities in San Francisco, who, as I mentioned, because of a lot of the things that have happened because of COVID, are especially feeling more or less disconnected. One of the things that we're working on in the coming year is to really think about what does connectivity mean, and how are we best addressing how people with disabilities can be connected virtually to any kind of experience, whether it be taking the census or participating in a public meeting or being able to experience a virtual forums like this one in a way that involves everybody. Now, all that said, the positive side of things is we have learned, for those individuals who do have access to technology, it really has opened opportunity and experience for people with disabilities in ways that I haven't experienced myself before. For instance, July was the 30th anniversary of the Americans with Disabilities Act, and so there were a lot of virtual celebrations because of this, and I attended several that had hundreds of people on them, all with disabilities from all over the world, and it was a very inspiring experience in the best sense of that word, right? Where we really do know that people can come together and people will participate if they have access to the resources that they need and access to information. Now, though, we in what we have left and the folks that we are trying to still reach, we're making a couple of assumptions. One is that the folks that do have access to the technology that they need have more than likely participated in the census. So now we're trying to reach folks who really do need to use a phone as a primary way to complete the census, or people that have other fear around the census, or really just don't have as much contact with other people besides maybe a home care provider or someone delivering a meal, or than they have in the past, because they're just not out as much. So we're really needing to think about how do we reach people now inside their homes when they might not have a computer or a reliable internet connection. The best way to accomplish this is through working with all of you to try to continue to reach as many people as possible in as many ways as we can. And I'll stop there for now, but I'm happy to elaborate or answer any questions or whatever you'd like to do next.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Adrienne, and thank you, Nicole. Nicole, I will say this, you're kind of our hero right now.
Oh, thank you.
Have a poster of your face on our wall at some point.
Whatever you need to do is fine with me. That's great.
It's so good to hear, not only those kind of actions have been taken on the political governmental side, but also your intake on what the reality is. And I think we at CE have experienced actually virtual poverty very clearly. We're obviously trying to act against it in ways like that includes distributing iPads to artists, that include like beyond on a constant conversation on the phone if they don't have access or a constant access to internet. And it's something that, to be honest, I personally wasn't aware of until COVID hit, like the capacity of being able to be connected with the world. And that includes obviously the ability to fill the census, or to be able even to be aware of things like the census.
Right.
So I want to thank you all so much for everything that you've said today. And I'm going to turn actually to our audience and see if there is any questions. So either you can put it in the chat or you can unmute yourself if you have a question for one of our panelists.
Again, I wrote a note. This is so inspiring, the work of all of you. I mean, I've known about these projects, but now I learned so much more, even just listening to you. So thank you so much for everyone's contribution. What do you think has been the kind of one of the most surprising successes that you've seen happen with, especially with COVID? Sounds like you've had a lot more collaboration among partners, but is there anything that's really been inspirational to you that's been and resulted in a success?
I'm happy to jump in, from the Art+Action side. I would say, and I'm not just saying this because she's, 2 squares away from me, but, Ana Teresa Fernández and Arlene Correa Valencia, they have been so committed, to really ensuring that everybody and anybody is counted and is seen and is heard. And so initially, pre-COVID, we had planned these Somos Visibles kind of hoodie ironing stations where people could talk and really have authentic conversations about their fears or concerns or questions, because prior to this project, all I knew was, oh, they count you every 10 years. I didn't understand the links between the distribution of federal funding to basically fund everything, libraries, parks, like road repair and essential emergency services, things like that. And I certainly didn't understand, and Anne, with the vote thing behind you, this brings this to bear, the link between the census and voting, and that without a proper census count, voting doesn't mean anything for the next 10 years, since it determines the electoral college, it determines redistricting. So particularly in a year of a presidential vote, everybody's so focused on that, but they also need to understand that unless they've done their census, it will shift and skew vote for the next 10 years. So all I was going to say was that, Ana and Arlene initially had been planning to go out in community at flea markets and in street fairs and in different locations to kind of be ironing on these Somos Visibles on hoodies and We Are Not Invisible, and to engage in these dialogues. And of course, with COVID, that had to shift, and that went online to kind of digital demonstrations, et cetera. But in these past, month or two, since, post-COVID, and as some things have started to loosen, in terms of precautions and understanding COVID protocols better, we didn't personally feel comfortable asking our artists, hey, can you go back out, or would you do this? And they came to us and they said, we want to go back out. We want to make sure these communities are counted, and we're doing this. And we said, we will do whatever we can to support you. And yes, and you're amazing, and warriors, and just to kind of these equity warriors going out and making sure people are being seen and heard. So I would say an inspiring and surprising thing is they've been inspirational and continue to be. And what's amazing and what's been working is that at these activations that they've done in the Mission during the COVID recovery fair, and in Napa, where Arlene kind of is able to kind of talk to a lot of the undocumented community and who are kind of vineyard workers right now, who, given the fires, are even more compromised, as well as Ana Studios in the Bayview. They've gone out into these communities that are of these hard to count communities and have gotten people to do their census by, with hoodie giveaways, with shirt giveaways, that kind of thing. And they're currently planning to do several more. So that's been really incredible to see the continued commitment by our artists and creatives. And I think also that the communities themselves respond to it shows that when artists are leading these dialogues and artists are leading these conversations, it opens it up to a human element that sometimes the data points and bullet points can't do. It can't move the needle potentially in the same way.
And to piggyback off of Amy's really generous comments and really informative comments, I think that both Arlene and I have really seen the information disparity and the accessibility. I think Nicole was provided a lot of information of that as well, and being on the ground. And actually, like Amy said, we went out into the fields at night with the grape pickers, and the amount of fear that these individuals are really reserved, and a lot of times are just terrified. And so fear being one of the primary obstacles in having these conversations, and really just, and I think that the ones that we were able to reach more were individuals with children here in the US, because we really kind of pushed the fact that this would benefit pretty much all of their surroundings, as Amy stated. But one of the things that I learned a lot was not only the fact that language helps a lot, but also there's illiteracy. And that was something that really, when someone hands you a license, their license for you to fill everything out because they don't know how to read or write, the amount of vulnerability and that moment just made my knees buckle. And having that interaction with that 67-year-old individual was just like, you know, and there were several of those interactions where you just realize how many, again, the word obstacles there are, and how to erase those obstacles. And it means being present, having to show up and going and meeting them, because otherwise there's just absolutely no way you can access them being counted. So it's been an incredibly a huge learning curve.
Nicole or Adrienne, do you have anything to add to that?
I would say for me, I just would highlight again, one of the things that has made me the happiest and the proudest through our COVID response is just seeing and experiencing as evidence when people with disabilities have access to what they need to participate in whatever that means. People with disabilities really do come together, and they want to come together. So in a lot of ways, even though the internal response that we're hearing is people with disabilities are concerned about being forgotten about and feeling invisible, when they have opportunity to come together and participate, when they have access to the technology they need, or the adaptive software or whatever it is, it really has opened up participation and diversity in so many ways that have been so great. I mean, I've seen people in meetings that I've never seen in meetings before, just because we're able to, for some of us, come together easier. And so I guess a positive of COVID now that we're thinking about is what have been some of the, in the ways that we've had to adapt, what now can we maintain and keep going even when we have, you know, resolution to this time period that we're in. You know, is there a reason to go back to the other way of doing things now that we know that we can creatively participate in new ways? And what does that mean? So I just really like to encourage people to think about what you can maintain that you started doing that's actually been a positive that would lead to more participation and contribution.
Yeah, and for me, I love what Nicole just said. I think it's inspirational. You know, this is not easy. The census is not the most exciting topic. It's not a sexy topic. People don't go, oh boy, the census. So, you know, every challenge possible has presented itself, right? We can't do all the things that we originally planned. You know, you've got an administration that's not very supportive, not supportive at all. You've got a Census Bureau that's messed up, but it is the partnership with the community and all these different diverse groups coming together, and our artists, city departments, and it's the resilience of our people who have had the hardest time. You know, those communities that are in the hard to count areas who were hardest hit by COVID-19 already were vulnerable in many other ways, but their ability to survive and overcome, adapt, and innovate and create something new. And I think it just goes along with the movement with Black Lives Matter and the movement for social justice and equity, that this is a time where we are being tested to see if we can step up and step in and step forward. So that part is really inspiring to me.
Absolutely, that's a great way to answer. Actually, so we're going to take two more questions, Ruth and Heidi next. So Ruth.
Sorry, I'm having internet problems at home, so I can relate to the issues about having access. I'm kind of curious about whether or not you've done any kind of statistical analysis and whether it's possible to even do that to know about the non-participants, because we've talked about a variety of different communities and how they've been impacted and maybe fear about participating. I have been interested to see that, for instance, a lot of the basketball players have pushed hard on registration for voting. But I'm not hearing so much about the census in the same way. And I guess I'm wondering, with 3 weeks left, what's the low-hanging fruit? What would be the next big chunk of people that we might still get to participate in the census?
That's a good question. The city has 67% renters, and a lot of our renters have moved away. If you lost your job and you can't pay the rent, that is not going to be an option for you anymore. But the people that are still here is about 10 to 13% of people who have the ability to jump online right now and do the census. They don't face the same physical or digital or language barriers that other people do. If we could, that is the low-hanging fruit. If we could convince them to do it now because it's important and they get that it's important, that will put the city in a much better position. Because historically, we've had about 25% of the city that's been hard to count anyway because of the traditional barriers. But the 10 to 13% that could do it right now are the folks that we need to convince and motivate.
I was just going to mention that another presentation that Adrienne gave last week, one of the things also that struck me was that one of our transient populations is our students who are participating, differently right now. And so one thought I have in terms of reaching more folks is really working through those kind of student family connections and reminding folks that way, just because, not only are people isolated, they're just not present in the city at the same time as they were, but they're still residents, right? And they would still count as part of San Francisco. So thinking about those groups that do move around a lot and how can we say, hey, please take 5 minutes and do the census or make a phone call. Or also, I think really, at least from a disability perspective, being more intentional about, in San Francisco, it's so strange. Some neighborhoods are much better about actually reaching out to their neighbors than others. And so really now we're looking at a person-to-person, neighbor-to-neighbor, just start really talking it up. Have you completed the census? Do you need any help? Can really starting to work on that individual level.
Yeah, and I was just going to say, given the shifts and changes and some of the surprising elements of who hasn't participated, it's not just the hard to count and lower socioeconomic status communities. It's also been a lot of the affluent communities in San Francisco hadn't responded either, often because people just don't understand, because it is a more complex thing than a vote. It hasn't been unpacked in a way that explains, like, potholes aren't partisan, it changes your road repair, it's emergency response, it's all of these sorts of things that the census determines. So in terms of pivoting and trying to reach this low-hanging fruit of, like, all right, these folks, they just don't know. And yet you also have people who are food vulnerable as well, and they don't know because they're just, trying to survive. So we, kind of had to pivot our strategy, and we put these How to 2020 Census postcards that tell you why it's important and what it is. and we distributed them through not only like the food banks and all of that, so they're getting in all the boxes and all the lunch pickups, those kinds of things, but similarly with Good Eggs, which is like, you know, a kind of more upscale food delivery service, they're putting 25,000 postcards into all their boxes between now and the census ends. So we've just had to think strategically about how do we reach all these different sectors where they are now, and in the distribution channels that in this very compromised time can actually reach them. But I also echo the person-to-person thing right now, of, you know, if you can and you have the capacity, you can literally, you know, even print out our postcards from our website, that same How to 2020 Census postcard, or we'll even print them and mail them to you. Like, bring them to your neighbors, drop them off, or pick up a phone. Kind of old school phone banking has been something that OSEA, you know, has kind of been getting a lot of people working on census. It's now the time to go old school. Pick up your phone, call people, ask a friend, ask a loved one, ask a cousin, whatever it is, you know, be that census nag between now and September 30th, you know, because this will affect our country for the next 10 years.
Absolutely, that's all extremely accurate, and
Thank
best
you.
way to talk to your friends, your family, everybody. Heidi, we have one question for you, I believe.
Yeah, actually, hi, I'm Heidi. I'm from Jacksonville, Florida, and I actually got my my question answered just by listening to everyone. But I definitely want to say, like, I am really inspired and impressed by the initiative that everyone in San Francisco has made, and I would love for the same kind of like fire and passion that you guys have here in Jacksonville. I guess my question I intentionally wanted to ask was specific more on social media, and I think maybe it's just my circle that I'm currently following right now, but I just don't quite see as much of a push on the census in comparison to how we are with voting. Like on Instagram, there's already a little tag that says, hey, you should register to vote. And I'm like, but there should also be the same push that they have for voting on to the census. And I know we have touched on it already, but I just feel like in my case as an ambassador, like my reach is college students, but I also recently graduated, so I'm 25, so I'm thinking like people around my age and, you know, friends and family that just don't know, because it's not as, like you were, Adrienne was saying, it's not a sexy topic. But like, what else could we do?
Well, just to share, you know, I mean, agreed, like, the census is a little bit of a more complicated issue, so it's harder to unpack. It's not like a simple thing. And in this country, we haven't been educated to understand really what it does or what it's about or how crucial it is. So communicating that to people, they're like, what? The census, what? That's like a weird bureaucratic form, whatever. They don't understand how it touches their lives. And so there have been a lot of different organizations, some of whom are in our coalition, like the Census Open Innovation Labs, like to come up with like kind of memes and gifts like that are going to speak to people and help them understand and communicate what those are. They also have a toolkit of cool things, and you can also repost their things on Instagram, but ways that how do we humanize it and make it personal for everybody at all these different ages and segments. So there are organizations doing that. And yeah, I echo like you have a lot of the kind of celebrities and athletes talking about, the vote. You don't necessarily have that with the census, although there is an organization called Harness, that's by Wilmer Valderrama and Angel Ferrara. And they kind of had a big census push going on and kind of getting celebrities to make some PSAs. That was like one of a few ones that we've seen. And even in our own approach, we approach the warriors like nonstop. Hey, you want to do a census PSA? And they've been pretty unresponsive, unfortunately. So it's just, I think it's a harder issue. We just have been undereducated in this country about understanding, which is ironic because, unlike voting where you have to be 18, you have to be a citizen, this is anybody in this country can do. So if there's anything that is like the foundation of democracy, it really is the census.
Yeah, I wanted to piggyback on what you said real quick, that I think it's been extremely hard to create movement, especially with the younger demographic. But they are, I'm I'm on a panel on Thursday with the San Francisco Young Democrats. So this is really helping me, Heidi, think about how I'm going to approach that, because we've done a lot of social media messages. I love the art that has been created, and you'll see billboards. I love, my favorite tagline is "We are not invisible," right? I want one of those sweatshirts too, those hoodies. That's my favorite. But trying to create movement at the last minute when you only have 15 minutes, 15 days left, we can do it. It's not going to be easy, but people are tired and worn out, and they're kind of sad right now. And I think if we can lift that up, you are going to see a Warriors and Giants PSA. We finally got an answer for them. So and it just takes, sometimes it's just, you make a phone call and the person at the top does it for you. And never mind that it's like a year later from when you asked, as long as they come through, right? Someone shows up, it could be destiny. They showed up at the time you needed them. So I think we have to not give up. We have to keep moving it. But this is giving, our office does a lot of civic engagement work. So it does kind of give me food for thought of how are we going to engage 16-year-olds when they get the vote? And how do they get educated on how to vote with responsibility? So yeah, I don't have an answer for that. Just that, we haven't found the person that can inspire hope and kind of fire up this campaign. We're doing the best we can. If you know a celebrity, let me know.
Yeah, exactly.
There's actually this one singer, her name is Alina Baraz, and her song, it's literally called Coming to Your Senses, but it's like census, not census. And it's actually quite sensual, but when you cut like a little part, I think it's like 1 minute and 35 seconds, you just get, I'm getting close to coming to my senses. And I'm like, that's perfect for Instagram or TikTok or Facebook, but, I would like to see more of, I guess, media-driven type things like that. Yeah.
I think one of the things that we've learned is if we don't see it, we need to create it. So now's the time to help link that information together and just do it. That's one of the things that I've been inspired by also, is just when we've been kind of forced to come together and solve problems. It is amazing to me, being a lifelong government employee in different institutions, how well we've been able to come together right now and just really try to get stuff done for the good. And so, just do it, as they say.
Yeah. And the last thing I'll just say on that note is that, in this moment of like global kind of anxiety and, at least in the Bay Area, smoky air and kind of this, the census really is an act of hope, because it's future facing, it's future forward, it's thinking about the next 10 years, because there will be another 10 years, you know what I mean? So I think that's the other thing, is that, something we were really intentional about this entire campaign is that, unlike, we didn't want to feed into the current administration that is constantly fanning the flames of fear and be like, you have to do this or else, but like, how do we communicate the stakes while also just having it be light and hopeful and vibrant and bright, which is why these artists are leading this. But again, to kind of tell all your folks who right now are, very overwhelmed, understandably, by everything against us, that this is, an act of faith and of looking towards the future and an act of hope.
And to kind of put a period on that, because I hear that the census, it's not sexy, I would disagree with that, because there's a huge billboard now, 3 actually, in which our co-conspirator Arlene Correa Valencia is looking extremely sexy, wearing her "We're Not Invisible" shirt with really, really provocative messaging from Art+Action. So I think that they were super courageous to do this, to take that leap and just kind of say what it is. And Amy, do you wanna, I don't know word for word what the billboard says, but it has Erlene's image wearing that shirt, and she's an incredible, beautiful, I can't say her status, but she's, you know, she's definitely showing, she's the face for this billboard. And I think that that's one of the things that we need to do, is show images of, you know, brown and Black individuals as the face of these campaigns, so they can see themselves. And Amy, do you want to say what it said?
Yeah, well, first of all, I just want to say that, you know, the ability to kind of go rogue in this way, you know, and again, while we've kept the campaign very positive and uplifting, it was Adrienne who's like, we need to do something really edgy and something really, you know, say it like it is. So, you know, I give props to Adrienne for kind of saying like, go for it, you know, but it says the White House wants to erase us. We have until September 30th to stop them. Go to my 2020 census and be counted. So, you know, and the picture was actually in the presentation I gave earlier on one of the slides, on slide number 17. But so, yeah, so that billboard is up on US, you know, 101 and Bayshore and the Bay Bridge and Toll Plaza and all of that. So, you know, again, we want to catch people's attention so they, you know, start to kind of pay attention.
Yeah, and we did try to put that, I asked to put that across City Hall, and they thought that, well, that might be a little too provocative, but they're open to another image if you have one. Maybe just the message has to, you know, be tweaked a little.
Sorry, hashtag sexy census 2030. I think that's a great one to start. Thank you so much. Thank you to all our panelists. We're going to wrap this up. I just wanted to say that this is kind of the point of the show, kind of start the conversation and move forward, and also kind of make sure that everybody knows about what's going on. We actually also have a digital kit that we put together with some of the Census Art+Action material, plus the voting material with the Good Americans. So feel free to download it on our website and go check the show out. Thank you, ladies, for all these incredible informations, and for all your work, because, I mean, it's important more than ever, and I feel like we all know this, but it's good to preach to choir even more sometimes. And please visit us whenever we reopen. We would love to have you over, and thank you again. Really appreciate it.